How's it going? This is Jeff Saxton, and want to talk today about growing your ministry. And this is going to be kind of a mind-blowing message, and it's not at all intended to be bragging or me saying, "Look at me," or anything like that at all. In fact, it's the opposite. Okay, I really believe that anybody who is breathing and has a pulse can grow any ministry they're doing. And here's why I'm saying that. And this is, right away I'm going to remove all kinds of style issues or, charisma or anything like that. And actually, as I begin to explain this to you, I believe the blinders are going to come off your eyes, and you're going to realize it has nothing to do with anything of us. Okay. And it's actually something that you or I, as a Christian leader, we have to get rid of things in order to do this, not add things. So actually, if you think that you don't qualify and you can't do this, I'll show you why. There's nothing that has to do with you that's unique. So that's the good news. Okay, I think when people hear that, they're excited. And Jeff, have you had experience doing that? I mean, and again, I'm not saying this in a bragging way, but any ministry that I've ever done, any small group, any larger group, and I've been, just to give you background, I've been in the church world for 30-some years full time. I've been a youth pastor. I've been in 2 mega churches. I've been in medium-sized churches. I've been on staff at 10 churches and 2 non-church but like parachurch organizations. So that's 12 full-time staff experiences, and in those positions, I was either the senior pastor, because I've also been a senior pastor. I've been a church planter. I've also been an associate pastor. I've been in charge of small group ministry for a mega church that we had 50 small groups, and I was in charge of every one of those 50. We started with 25 and we doubled it, and that was only because the senior pastor, he didn't I'm just joking, but he kind of threatened me. No, he didn't. He just said, "You got to double these." I'm like, "Oh, great." So I'm like, "Lord, what do we do?" Now, but it sounds grandiose and all this, but like I told you, when you get done here, you're going to realize that anybody could do what happened. Anybody who's following Jesus could do this. That's the key. You got to be following Jesus. That's how you do it. You follow Jesus personally. Okay, I'll break that down in a second. I also was in charge of, when I was in one of my parachurch organization jobs, I was in charge of Youth for Christ in Omaha, Nebraska. They have over 70 junior high and high schools. And the goal for me was to make a ministry impact on all 72 campuses. Now imagine having that as your job. Thank God I had some big-time income people in Omaha get on board with me and help me build that out. But God did it. Okay, God built it out. When I started, I was the only paid staff there. And I was put in charge of making a ministry campus presence on each one of those 72, and we had only one when I started. Now, I'm going to way back up here. Okay. Before I was in the full-time ministry and doing all that, actually, that's not where all of the important training and experiences began. Actually, the real impacting experiences in my life and ministry happened right after I became a Christian. I was going to a small church, and we were in a small youth group, and there was just a handful of kids there, and I was 19 years old, brand new saved. I didn't know anything. I knew very little about the Bible, and I was just going to this small church. And I wanted to go to big churches. I had a lot of friends going to the big churches. But God wanted me at this small church. And at first it was okay, and then I got really frustrated. And then when I realized that God was calling me to ministry, first of all, I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I was equipped enough. I didn't think I had the gifts. So I avoided that for quite a while, about a year. And when I was 20, finally, God made it clear to me He wanted me to make youth ministry my job, my career. And then that is a long story of 3 or 4 years at a college, and I changed my major to youth ministry and all of that. But doing youth ministry, well, unbeknownst to me, was going to be the thing that God used to show me what ministry is. And even that, I'm got to share another story with you. Again, I really doubted that call. I really doubted my gifts, that they fit in leadership. I really felt like I was a sub guy. I was better at assisting someone else. But a lot of that, there was just inner, weaknesses and anxieties I had to get rid of. But I'll never forget when I first was just starting to explore, changing my major, because I was going to a ministry college, North Central Bible College in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They had just hired a youth ministry professional to head a new department at North Central for youth ministry. His name was Rick Olson. And Rick was a dynamic, obviously gifted man. He was all over the United States, flying everywhere, preaching, speaking, impacting. Everything he had done had grown. He was a very dynamic person, and I just knew that this is not who I am. I'm nothing like him. But I thought I had to be that, and I realized not too much later that I didn't have to be all that. Here's what I mean. I remember when Rick came to speak at this tiny church that I was going to, and I was so excited, and I had met Rick, but I didn't really know him. But I went up and I introduced myself to him, But I knew he was going to preach an evangelistic message, and I didn't have any youth that I was impacting, and I knew if I'm going to be a youth pastor, should I invite some youth? And I was really, really embarrassed that I didn't really have anyone to invite, and so all I can say, I just got bothered. I was like, when am I going to start looking around me and just, spreading the gospel? Am I just going to hoard it to myself? I mean, someone shared it with me and it impacted me. Someone invited me to that church and I came. I'm in this tiny little youth group of a handful of people. We're not really growing, but I just wanted to reach out. So I thought I'll get on the phone and I'll just call a list of my old friends, And I was hopeful I could bring 4, 5, 6 to come hear Rick Olson. Well, everyone said no except one person. Now, not that this matters at all, it doesn't. But the only person that said yes to me was a black kid, one of my black friends from where I grew up. There was kind of a racially dynamic, integrated area, which I love. I love that was how I grew up. I got to really learn that people are not just the color of the skin, but much deeper than that. People are human beings, and everyone's the same. And I was really close to some of these guys. So one of them said, yeah, I'll come. I was really shocked, and I hadn't talked to this person in at least 5 years. And in fact, they were a teenager. This guy, his name's Andy. He couldn't even drive, so I had to go pick him up. His parents said that was okay. So I remember the first night I came to pick up Andy because he couldn't drive, and his parents were so thankful that I was taking him. I'll never forget that. But I'd lost touch with Andy. I had no idea what was going on in his life. We were childhood friends, and now here, I'm 20 years old and he's 15. And his parents said, "Thank you so much, Jeff. We can't tell you how blessed we are." And they were even more appreciative than they should have been, I thought. I was trying to think, boy, what's going on with Andy? Hopefully he's not like in some trouble or something. And I wasn't sure, So I took Andy, and he looked great. He was dressed really better than I was. He looked like, wow, that was a nice Sunday outfit. Nice sweater, as I remember. It's been decades ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly all the details, but I'll never forget overall. He really wanted to come and hear this guy, and from the beginning, Andy was totally into the message. He responded, and Rick was very strong evangelistic type of gift, and he invited kids to come to the front if they wanted to give their lives to Christ. And Andy pretty much ran, and I got up and went after him. Now, you can't make people do these type of things. Of course, God's got to be doing it. So that's your first lesson: is you want to make a difference, you want things to grow. First of all, are you in growth position? Do you know there's a growth position? Totally is. Well, I just explained it to you. It's no more complicated than that. Do you believe God does it? Do you believe God can speak to people? Do you believe God can convict people of their sin? Do you believe God can, impact people's hearts when someone preaches the gospel and they can respond? If you do, well, I did experience a very, very powerful, dynamic testimony myself of God doing that to me. So I knew he could do it for someone else. And I was doing some really bad stuff. So I knew that, especially if someone's a bad sinner, sometimes they're the closest to making the change for Christ. I was shocked that Andy, of all people, even wanted to come hear this guy. And now here he is up front. And then pretty soon I'm praying with him, and it was a great night. And as I remember, we stayed there long. He met at least 10 people at the church. And I thought, wow, this is great. Here's a guy that responds. Maybe he'll come to the youth group because I'm trying to get this youth group to grow. And at least we got Andy. I drove home that night, and I want you to listen to this. I drove home him that night, and we only had a couple minutes because it wasn't that far from his parents to the church. Got to his house for him to go in, and his parents are waiting for him. But he took a few minutes, and he was just sharing with me what had been going on in his life that year. And he begins to tell me that he was pretty much serving the dark side. And what does he do now? And I'm like, oh boy. I was way over my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he shared some stories with me that you would not believe probably. And I was like, Andy, I can't believe that you are into that whole thing. You totally sure look like a churchgoer here. So Andy asked for my help right there. And then I felt God speak to me and said these, and I want you to listen to this. Jeff, 3 times a week, 3 years. Isn't that funny? 3 times a week, 3 years. And what do you think my first emotion was? Anger. I'm angry. Here's Andy. My dream come true. This kid comes to Christ, and now he wants to go to my church. Excuse me, choking up. And this is what I wanted, and now here I am furious. Here's a kid, and now he didn't ask me. He wants to go to church 3 times a week for 3 years, but I knew the Holy Spirit was asking me to make my schedule clear, and that's why I was angry. And I knew if I brought it up, Andy would probably go, oh, yeah, sure. And now I'm committed to it. So here I am like, oh, man. So I found myself saying, would you like to come to church Sunday? And immediately, yes. And again, I rejoice with him, but inside I'm angry because I'm like, I got a social life. I want to meet a Christian girl. I want to, I don't want to go to church with Andy. What am I telling you right now? You know that what I'm telling you is the secret to growth in ministry. I learned almost immediately, and I was furious about it. Yep. You got to ask yourself, how much do you really want to grow? You got to ask yourself, how much do you really want God to do something in your ministry? Now, it's not that, hey, what did I really give up? 3 times a week, 3 years. I had to pick him up, Sunday morning, Sunday night, because back then we had church both Sunday morning and Sunday night. Can you imagine what Andy did to this church? Here suddenly I'm bringing this kid who was there 3 times a week. He immediately became part of the youth group, became part of the church. Everyone heard his story. He gave up and gave his testimony. It just really made a massive difference in our youth ministry. Definitely changed my life. And it didn't stop there, guys. When you do something like that with someone, you begin to closer, you're going to hear more about their story. Pretty soon, you know what? I invited him over to my parents for Thanksgiving. We hung out. We went to movies together. I mean, Andy and I, and then of course his parents, because he was 15, and even back then I was way beyond, like, I was always making sure the parents were involved, and there was no question people knew there's anything going on other than good discipleship connection there. But they were very involved, and they were just in tears when they heard that he had made this change. And then I realized why. It's because he had a lot of junk he had to get rid of, confess, and that took about a year to help Andy get through all that. And I don't have time right now. And see, here's the thing: it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you some things if you do what I'm going to tell you to do. But that's, at 20 years old, I had more of an education on ministry training than I ever got in any college. 4 years at that Bible college, you know, even seminary, anything like that is only going to teach you the book side of things. There's no other way I could have got this. And if it would have stopped there, that's one thing. But I actually met a youth evangelist after that who eventually ended up mentoring me in how to share my faith with people out in the street. And I brought Andy with me, and it just went to another level. Now, so I have a lot more I could share about that, but I want to just end with this. It could go forever. And you're asking this morning, what are principles? How do I get my ministry to grow? And I told that story as a way of telling you without having to tell you everything. If you're intentional about growing any group, let's start real small, because I started with one, and that's the secret. You got to start with one. You got to start with one. McDonald's started with the first McDonald's. You got to start with one person. Everybody wants to go to 2, 3, 4, 10, big church Sunday morning. Slow down. Go backwards now. Don't skip the process. You and I need to start with one person. And that's one of the big problems with big church today is everybody wants the mega church. You know, are you willing, now, first of all, ask a question to yourself. Do you want to grow God's way? Secondly, are you willing to pay the price? If you could be not guaranteed, but if you could be almost assured that doing biblical steps God's way would grow that particular ministry, would you do it? If you could almost be promised, without officially being promised, of course, that your ministry right now, that you're wishing for it to grow, that it would grow if you would make some changes in your life as the leader, that it would grow, would you do it? I've seen this process reproduced in so many people, hundreds of people, in my ministry in the last several decades. But it all started with me back then in Bible college when I did one. I first made it. So I'm trying to say that every single youth ministry I ever was always grew. But it's because of what I did with Andy, and that was not even something I wanted to do. And I was furious when the Holy Spirit said, this is what it's going to take, Jeff. Are you willing? So the thing you really need to ask is, are you willing to pay the cost? That's really what this is about this morning. Okay? Well, it's morning to me, but maybe it's afternoon, evening. Whenever you're listening to this, are you willing to pay the cost? Because if you are, I can tell you this. It'll work sooner or later, no matter where you're at. Because God's principles work anywhere. But we have to pay the price. So, let's say you want to start a Bible study. Okay? You want to start a Bible study, and now there are two types of Bible studies. Okay? There's Bible studies that are meant to grow. If you invite more people would come. And then, so those are like, I guess you could say outreach oriented Bible studies. And then there are closed Bible studies where it's like 4 people and just those 4 sign up, and only the 4 of you go through that. Now, they both are important and they both need to be done, ironically, but we're going to talk now about the kind where there's an open end, you can invite new people to it. Okay. And I think that's easier when you first start out. Even though, well, let me say this. If you do the close first, that's okay too. If you pick one person, But let me just show you how it works the other way, okay? So let's say you want to do a Bible study for high school kids, and you probably can't do it sometimes we can do it in the campuses, but maybe you can't, or your college age. But let's just say, for just to illustrate, you decide to meet at Caribou Coffee. Now, maybe that'd be hard to do because it's a public place and you can only do so much. But let's just say that's what you do, because sometimes I've done a number of groups in a public coffee place, but sometimes it's easier to do it at a person's home. But regardless, let's just say you're at a Caribou and it's once a week, and you start out and you're like, and how am I going to get people to come to this group? Hopefully the study's good. Hopefully, you've got good material or a good book. A lot of times the best thing to do is just take a good book and just go through it together, and then the pressure's off you. You don't have to come up with the material. All you got to do is invite people. But like I said, that's easier said than done, isn't it? Here's what you're going to find is usually, unless you've got a group of people already, usually you're starting out and nobody wants to come because nobody knows about it. So usually you've got to invite a bunch of people, and it might only be a few people show up. Maybe you might have 25. So I would encourage you to invite a bunch of people to something, strangers or friends. But initially you may find very few people show up. Now, if you are at a place where you don't know a lot of people, it may have to do the other thing and kind of do what the first story I shared, and just invite one person and make it be just a meal between you and one other person. And you could invite 20 people one at a time. Like if you went out for coffee with 20 different people, and at the end of your coffee time, you invite each one of them to a Bible study you're going to be doing later, that could work. But sooner or later, some gifts have to be there. Like, I believe anybody can go up to a friend and, invite them to a church function, or invite them to a big event, invite them to a concert. Anybody could do what I did with that Andy, right? Anybody could do that. So maybe that's where you're at today. But if you have a ministry desire, a ministry calling, or any kind of position, or you're trying to currently grow, maybe a church or even a small group, then you probably need to have some gifts, leadership gifts, to do that. Okay, now if you're low on the leadership gifting, then you may need to be part of some other leader's ministry and help that leader do. That's a great way to learn as well. I think I always recommend that. Even if you do have leadership gifts, if you're just starting out, you haven't done this before, maybe you're needing to join an existing thing and help that person's thing grow. Does that make sense? But either way, at the end of the day, it's all about the one. It's about Andy, and whether the story I shared or coming to your group, but we need to reach out and invite some people to something. I find that one of the easiest things to do right now, because a lot of people want to go to the church on Sunday morning, because Sunday morning church is kind of cool. It's usually amazing lighting, and right now there's some awesome church stuff on Sunday mornings. It wasn't always that way. You used to have to take people to a concert or something else or a speaker that was really great, that people would want to go and hear. But you do whatever it is, or you could, if you have enough things that you have on your own, you could even just watch a YouTube video together, or you could even go through a book together at a coffee shop and just say right off the bat, hey, would you want to hang out and just go through this book once in a while together and just kind of encourage one another? That's a lot of people will do that. I would really pray about that. That would be something that I think almost anybody could do. And you really get close to another person. They may never come to faith, or they may be a Christian already, but they may not get too much out of it, but at least you're doing something with one other person, because like I said, at the end of the day, it's about that person. If you are the leader of a group, you need to be doing this with when I start out with and I'm trying to get a group to grow, and I have a handful of people, I do what I just said. You just do one-on-one with those 6 people. You got 6 people coming. Are you hanging out with those people one-on-one? Are you calling them up one at a time? Jeff, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, that's part of this whole thing. But again, isn't that what Jesus would do? Isn't that what he did with his 12? Break down what Jesus did with his 12 people. He hung out with all of them together, right? Jesus would hang out with John, with even Judas, Matthew, all of the 12 disciples. Jesus would also hang out with them one at a time. And of course, he also hung out with the 12 a lot. We have a lot of different scriptures about that. Another thing that people forget is he also had smaller groups, like he would meet with the 3. Remember Peter, James, and John? So how he hung out with Peter, James, and John, that was his leadership, inner core leadership. But he could have just picked any random 3 and had what some people call a building group, a building time, when it's just you and 2 or 3 of your stronger, or it could be even it could even be your weakest of, if you had 12 people come to your small group and you pick the people that come the least, that also can work, because then the 3 of those people have something in common and you can kind of build them on their own. But I have, excuse me, the most important thing of what I was going to say in this entire message, I'm going to say right now. Okay. You say you've got this group of 12 and they won't grow and you're frustrated. If you spend some time investing in these people one-on-one, maybe even three on one, it's going to blow your mind how that's going to positively impact. Suddenly, sooner or later, your 12 are going to grow. Because when you're doing the one-on-one, first of all, they're going to come back. Your first problem is like, how do I get these 12 to come? Like, only 4 or 5 are showing up out of the 12. And then what most leaders do is they give up. They go, these people don't want it. Nope. Most of the time, the problem is people will come to something for a while, but if they're not personally impacted, if you don't call them one-on-one and ask how they're doing personally, they're not going to feel as drawn to want to come to your group after a while. That's just the way all groups go. That's the way human nature is. It's kind of the way leadership works, or the lack of it. So you need to be a strong leader, and you need to reach out to your 12 one-on-one. Okay, and I happen to have, and I don't have time for my mentor story, but I was mentored by a youth pastor guy, friend, who was different than the guy I met at Rick Olson. Not Rick Olson, but I'm talking about somebody else. But that person really, really got in my face to say, if you're not going one-on-one with these people, then don't expect your group to grow. Okay, so I'm just telling you the truth. Now, thank God I've had all this, there's a reason why I went through all this training, even against my will, even when I didn't want it. God gave it to me. And it's so that you don't have to go through some of the things that I had to go through, and you can just simply skip the non-essentials and get the essentials, which I'm giving to you right now. So do you understand now that, think about Jesus and the 12 and how any leader can do that? Any leader can invite 12 people to something and then get frustrated after a while for not coming every week if you have a weekly meeting, but then do what Jesus did. Reach out to these 12 one at a time, one-on-one. Call them on the phone. Listen to them. They got a funeral? Go with them to the funeral. Why not? They'll be blown away. Oh, they are in some sport? Go see their sport. Go to their game. Their parents don't even go sometimes. Go to their game. They won't believe it. What are you doing at my game? I just wanted to see how you're doing, man. That's great. That's really interesting. So how long have you played basketball? Let's say it's basketball. Now, I've done this many, many times, and I do this. And if you don't want to do this stuff, if you want your group to grow, then you're going to do some of this. It's true. I've had a full-time career most of the time, so I had a lot more time than some people. But on the other hand, when I think back, a lot of the things I did weren't necessarily out of the 40 hours a week that I was doing full-time ministry. Sometimes I would just give up a night, like anybody else. And even though when I didn't necessarily have the time, I made the time because that group was important to me. If you make the time for this kind of stuff, you will see results. Now, another thing you can do every once in a while is when it's time is you give a couple of these people a role. Let's say that your three strongest, your Peter, James, and John people, give them a role. Okay, guys, I need your help. Oh, yeah? Yeah, we're doing this group. Well, we want to see more than 12 people come to it. We're so glad for the 12 that are coming, but, okay. So, guys, what do we think we should do? What can we do to kind of spike this group? Well, let's do something fun. Let's do an event. Yeah, let's watch a football game. All right, cool. Let's do it. So 3 of you organize an event. And now you've got these 3 helping you invite 30, 40 people, whatever it is, to this event. And certainly a lot of the 12 are going to come and you're from your group. But even if they don't, and it really doesn't matter what happens, it's just that you're spending even more quality time with these 3 people, investing in them. Sooner or later, they're going to start taking on your values and they're going to want to help this group grow themselves. Now, what you're also doing is someday, one of these people, if not more, is someday going to lead a group of their own, and they're going to remember all the stuff they learned by being in this experience with you. Notice that all these things I'm telling you, none of them require anybody to be dynamic or charismatic or anything. It just requires someone to give a care. Give a care and sacrifice a little bit out of your schedule and do the work and follow through. Anyone can do this. I even know a paraplegic lady that was doing this, and I was part of her group, and I didn't know it at first. I thought I was helping her until I realized she was a very strong believer, and she was training me in something, and I realized that she was doing a ministry to many people, not just me, and probably at least 10 other people at that time. And I realized she was a very mature follower of Jesus and was mentoring me. I thought I was helping her the first few times we would go out. And her thing was we went out to this pizza once a month. And I thought I was the only one, but then I found out she was doing this with several people all at the same time. Isn't that funny? So it's intentional. And even if you're paraplegic, you can do it. She was quadriplegic, I'm sorry. She couldn't even move her arms. So if a quadriplegic person can do these things, anybody can do them. But one thing she did have, she had faith, she had confidence, and a real relationship with God. And she could speak, and she'd take a risk and tell people stuff. She was a prophetic person and willing to obey God. And as much as the Bible she knew, and she didn't require her to know much, she just happened to know a lot, but you can do that. When I was 19, I didn't know anything. You can do what I did, certainly. Anybody can do what it takes to grow your ministry. It's just we don't want to. So the real question today is, yeah, you want your group to grow, but do you really? If you knew what it takes, would you do it? It's kind of, when you listen to these business growth things, they're a very similar thing. It's really still the same things, the same kinds of things that help a person's business take off, is true in your ministry. It's just different actions. And of course, but here's the thing, guys, what would you rather do? Grow a business only makes you money, or would you rather grow a ministry that builds up the other people that God participates in, that you can see miracles happen, you can share in all the miraculous things God does, celebrate. There are unexplainable times of absolute heavenly divine encounters that you will experience with these people, and you'll never be the same again, and you'll probably have a kinship your entire life, even if you all go on to different things or go all across the world, possibly. There will always be a deep connection because of spending time together in this ministry. So this is really a special thing, and you can envision, okay, if no one's coming to your thing right now, you don't even need anybody to come to it. We've already gone over that. You can start with inviting the one to anything, and then if you get someone that is willing to come to Christ, that's one way. Now, I think that's even harder, right? Because it takes more time. But anybody can grow a group if you just invite a bunch of people. But you plan it right, you explain to them, you invite the right people, pick a good book, I could name several. Anything by Goff. What's that author's name? Goff. He's always got, every 2 years he comes out with a new book, and I've had so many groups just with his books, because each one is a story. It's easy to go through together, and they're Christian. Of course, these are Christian books. I mean, so now this is if to grow a Christian. So it's a Christian ministry I'm talking about. So if that fits what you're looking for, then this was very helpful to you, and I'm glad it was. Thanks for listening. Hopefully we can help you with other trainings as well. I just know if you apply these things, if you wake up every morning and you give God a few minutes of your day and you ask him to help you, and if he's leading you to do this, those are keys. If those things aren't there, then really, unless the Lord builds the house, those that labor build in vain. So, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit. Well, Jeff, I'm not into the charismatic thing. Well, I'm not talking about that. You don't have to be a charismatic, quote unquote, for this to happen. Anybody can do this if you're a Christian and you're following Jesus. That's all you need to do. Follow him in some specific ways, and sooner or later it'll grow. Okay, now some things, it's possible that it's meant to be a 3 or 4 people thing, a mentoring type of group. That's a thing too. Like I said, there are non-outreach small groups that are very important and powerful, and they're different. Usually you've got to recruit people, make them pray about it, and say yes to you and commit to it. Okay, yep, I understand. This is for 3 months. I'm in for 3 months. Okay, you got me every Tuesday for 3 months. You've got to get a bunch of people to commit to that. And if you're just doing like four persons, but you still got to get on the phone and ask people. You still need people to pray about it. You're going to probably have to ask 20 some people. You still got to put in effort and time. And yeah, it's true. Maybe nobody will say yes, but then you got to ask yourself, okay, was God in it? Experiencing God is a great training, because that teaches you to look, what is something that God is already obviously doing in other people? Okay, and then you see, okay, you're trying to get something to grow over here, and you don't really see God in it, but over here there's something God's obviously in. Well, the thing to do is get rid of the thing that God's not in your life, and join him in something else over here that he's already obviously doing. Does that make sense? Like, it was easy for me. I mean, I'm in some other youth group. I'm not the youth pastor. I was just a 19-year-old kid. But it was easy for me to see. I was already in something that God's in, and he wants me to be a part of. I knew that. And I just helped the youth pastor by inviting a few kids to come hear an evangelistic message. And then eventually our group almost doubled in a year from myself and other people. But, so there you go. I've shared about every possible situation you could be in, and I think we'll go from there. The word of the wise is sufficient, as they say. Thanks for listening. God bless you.